everybody, my name's Bear. I lead developer relations over at Slack. And with 10 minutes, I'm not going to try to rush you through, this is how you build a Slack bot from A to Z, because it'll take you maybe a little bit more than 10 minutes. So what instead I want to talk to you about is some of the UX considerations that are a little bit different on Slack's platform when you're building for work rather than a business-to-consumer end case. So for those of you who are less familiar with what our platform looks like and what you can do on Slack, we think about all the stuff that happens inside apps and inside bots as being part of workflows. Bots exist on Slack in order to help people get work done. So every workflow has 3 phases. You've got some sort of initiation, somebody kicks it off and expresses intent that they want to get something done, then they actually do it, and then there's some sort of wrap up. So when it comes to actually the features that comprise, or the workflow, compose a workflow, you're probably most familiar with notifications. You might have gotten notifications from a service inside Slack. But what we have added in the last year or so is a lot of options for taking action on those notifications. Buttons, menus, dialogues, so that people don't have to leave the context of the conversation and the work that they're doing in order to actually get something done. So if, for example, a GitHub notification pipes into Slack and you want to say, I acknowledge this alert, you can have a button in there that says acknowledge and pipe that information back into that third-party service so you can complete the workflow without ever leaving your conversation. So how do you do this right? Well, the first thing that we like to talk to people about is what actually belongs in Slack. If somebody wants to jam on a Google document with you about your messaging for an event that you're having, that may or may not happen in Slack. That's kind of a conversation to have. But when you get into the nitty-gritty details of working that out, there are other tools that are better. So when we think about what belongs in Slack, we actually have internal guidelines for how we think about what goes into SlackBot. And this flowchart we actually made available on our API site. So if you go to api.slack.com/best practices, you can see this in full here. But we make people think about it. Before you put content up inside SlackBot, we want to make sure that it's the right content, that it's sending people to a task that they can get done and not just a marketing message or like a, hey, did you know that? So we talk about this in terms of quick and contextual work. So in the case of Polly is a tool inside Slack that helps you create polls. Poll creation is something that you can do relatively quickly. You know that you have 4 options for lunch and you want to just quickly put something together and pop it inside Slack. That is a great quick action that can be done without leaving. And so what Polly has done is they've added in a dialogue that pops up and lets people fill in content more quickly than if they just had to click through a bunch of buttons. In a similar way, Wrike is a task management tool that through a / command you can invoke it and quickly create a task. Actually completing the task probably happens somewhere else, but the task creation and the task management can happen quickly inside Slack with the dialogue. So then beyond just thinking about what type of work has to happen in Slack, we've seen a couple of best practices emerge for what messages themselves should look like. Keeping content clear and succinct seems like an obvious thing to say. Like, of course you want to be clear in your message, but how many of you have tested extensively with users for clarity? I hope I see some hands, but I'd be surprised if I see all hands. Right. This actually pays huge dividends. So if you spend some time thinking about what the key message is that you want to stick inside this content here, you're going to see a lot better engagement, a lot more people completing actions. So in the case of OpsGenie, they could put in all of the details of the alert inside this message, but that's probably overwhelming. So they just let you know the top line content of the alert, and you have the option to click through if you need more details. It's also easiest for people if they know what action they're supposed to take here. So in OpsGenie's case, there's this big green button that draws your eye that says, all right, I acknowledge this, I can acknowledge it, or I can close it if I'm ready to here. And otherwise, it's highlighted inside a message menu for things that are maybe a little less important or less obvious. Another thing we see people take great advantage of is smart defaults. So if you have interacted with a bot before, instead of putting somebody through their paces of putting in content, I need this, I need this, I need the other thing, you can prompt them with the last thing that they chose and turn that into a one-click experience. So in this case, we had a coffee ordering bot that we built for when we have executives come to the Slack office, they can order a coffee. And if you give them the option to just reorder what they ordered last time, it's a faster, easier experience. One thing that's also particular to Slack is that everything inside a Slack message that has this colored bar on the side is what we call an attachment. And attachments are replaceable and editable. So if you send a message inside Slack, you can change up those attachments over time. And we want people to put thought into what actually needs to stick around in a channel. So this bot is called Lunch Train. And Lunch Train pings people to say, hey, people are going to lunch, here's where you can join them. And if you join the train, it sends you a direct message saying, hey, it's time to go meet everybody where they are. But if that train has already left, what do people in the channel need to see? You probably don't want them to be able to join the train still, right? So you can clean it up and just put in a new message that says, this train has already left, FYI. And that leads to less noise overall, and we consider it just kind of good app and bot behavior. On the other hand, Ops Genie might have a different track, because if they are thinking about the life cycle of an incident, you probably want checkpoints along the way that do persist. So if somebody's coming back into a channel and looking to see, all right, what's happened in the last 10 minutes, you should leave a paper trail. So all we want you to do is think about it, what should persist and what can go away. And then the last piece is about writing good copy. We've seen a lot of awesome bots on Slack that have great personalities, but sometimes having a big personality can get in the way of the clarity of your meaning. So this is, our principle is that you should be clear, concise, and human. And one of the things there that we try and get people to understand is emoji are fun and they're interesting. They should be illustrations on top of what you're saying, and they shouldn't replace real words. So in this case, if you're reading the sentence, yippee-ki-yay, Sarah's having a fire meet. What? So it's probably a lot better if you say she's having a cookout, and then fun, happy illustration. Another thing that we like to tell people is that on these buttons, if you say yeehaw to this, what does that mean? It's really helpful if you make it a positive declarative verb that either confirms an action that a user was going to do or clearly declines it, takes it in another direction. Concise, this also matters a lot. If I'm just trying to schedule a cookout and I get this message here, and I read the whole thing and realize, oh, this was just a joke, and it got in the way of me doing the task that I wanted to do, that can get kind of annoying. So we found that people have a little more, a little better results and better responses when you keep it concise. And still here, you're able to express your individuality here. You've got the emoji, you've got the howdy partner, and the name of your app too. And you can express a lot with relatively few words. So as a last thing to conclude, just to help bring my point home that bot copy really, really does matter. PaperBot, an app on Slack's platform, tested out some of their onboarding content. And the first thing that they tried out was this phrase here to get people to add them to channels. It's really important inside Slack for growth and adoption. And they had a 42% conversion rate when they got straight to the point. But they changed it up and tested it, and that bumped to 64% when they had a stronger call to action. All of which is to say, I have a lot more stories, and I'm happy to talk to you about them at length, but these are just some of the considerations that we'd love you to think about if you're building a Slack bot. Thanks for having me. Oh yeah, we've got time for questions. I thought I was right up against my 10 minutes. Cool.
So we have probably time for one question.
Make it good.
Bueller.
OK, well, thank you very much.